The room was filled with hushed whispers, the tension palpable as representatives from every corner of the galaxy filled the grand hall of the Galactic Council. Alien species, each more bizarre and exotic than the last, lined the marble floors. Their faces were stoic, their eyes fixed on the large screen hovering above the podium. At the center of it all stood the speaker, an elderly Xalorian with pale green skin and long flowing tendrils for hair. His voice echoed through the chamber, barely concealing his excitement. "This will be the final act in King Roshak's legacy," he said, his voice quivering. "It will be delivered to us now." A series of metallic whirs and clicks followed as the screen flickered to life, the hologram revealing the old king's last will and testament. The audience fell into an expectant silence. The name that appeared first on the screen was familiar to all, a figure who had grown infamous across the galaxy: Batman. No one spoke at first. The council members exchanged wary glances. What was this? Was there some mistake? The Xalorian speaker's fingers danced across the air, shifting the hologram with a mere swipe. "It is official," the will reads. "In my final days, I bequeath all my worldly possessions to Batman of Earth." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Batman, the man from Earth, the one who had made a name for himself as a ruthless strategist, a hero, and a terrifying force to be reckoned with. But this was something else entirely. "And his daughter," the speaker continued, his voice holding back a chuckle. "He leaves to be a man, Princess Aisha." More laughter echoed through the council chamber. The collective laughter of 1,000 species rose in waves, thick with mockery. Aisha, the ugly daughter of King Roshak. To the council, she was little more than a joke. Her appearance was a twisted mockery of beauty, twisted horns, uneven skin patches, and a face that looked as though it had been pieced together from several different species templates. Her very existence was a scandal within the royal circles. Batman inheriting such a figure. The thought was absurd. From the back of the hall, a dark figure stood motionless. Batman, a symbol of fear and justice, known across the universe, but one who was never bound by anything but his own code. Yet here he was, a man who had faced down galactic empires and hordes of alien conquerors, being handed the inheritance of a man he never met, and worse, the ugly daughter of that same king. The screen blinked again, revealing more details. The king's final request is for Batman to accompany Princess Aisha to the kingdom's capital, where his full inheritance shall be revealed. The future of the kingdom, and the weapon hidden within, will be his to command. The laughter died down, but the silence that followed was heavy with disdain. They would mock him, for they believed he would have no idea what to do with such an inheritance. They thought he would fumble, stumble, and squirm beneath the weight of the ridiculous responsibility. How could such a powerful figure be burdened with the king's daughter, of all things? The hologram fizzled and faded. All eyes turned toward the doors at the far end of the hall. There, standing in the shadowed threshold, was Batman himself. The room seemed to hold its breath. With his cape flowing behind him and his expression unreadable, Batman stepped into the light. He was no longer just the face of Earth, but now the inheritor of a kingdom, a family, and a weapon whose power could shake the stars. His stance was unwavering, confident, as though he had already known this moment was coming. He didn't need to say anything. The council was watching, waiting. But Batman, as always, let his silence speak volumes. The game was just beginning. The journey from the Galactic Council's Grand Hall to the distant kingdom of Roshak was long, and the ship Batman boarded was silent, save for the hum of its engines. As it sliced through the stars, the darkness outside seemed endless, and the weight of the inheritance pressed heavier on his shoulders with every passing minute. He had never expected this. An inheritance, much less a throne and a strange royal daughter. His mind was focused, as always, sharp and calculating. He had faced worse. He had handled situations that would make even the bravest tremble, but this was different. Princess Aisha, the so-called ugly daughter, was the key to everything. The inheritance, the weapon hidden within the kingdom. She was tied to it all. And Batman needed to understand why. His mind flickered back to the council's reaction. The mocking was endless, a sickening chorus of snickers and derision. But Batman had learned long ago to tune out noise. He was focused on the bigger picture. He didn't care about their laughter. They couldn't see what he saw: opportunity, strategy, and the potential for something far greater than just a kingdom. When the ship landed on the barren, wind-swept world of Rorschach, Batman was immediately greeted by an entourage of royal servants, their faces tight with professionalism. They led him through vast, glittering halls, their eyes filled with nervous curiosity. Princess Isha had not yet arrived to meet him, and they spoke of her with reverence, but the pity was clear. They led him to the royal chambers, where the air was thick with the scent of strange flowers from the kingdom's distant fields. He stood alone in the grand room for a moment, watching as holographic maps of the planet hovered around him. Yet the deeper he looked, the more he saw something out of place. The royal vaults weren't just filled with treasure. They were filled with secrets, too many for one king to have gathered. And the one secret he hadn't accounted for yet was Isha herself. The grand doors to the chamber opened with a soft whoosh, and in walked Princess Isha. She wasn't what he expected. Her appearance was, indeed, unusual. Her skin was an unnatural shade of green, and her eyes glowed with a strange, unnatural light. Yet there was an elegance in her movements, a quiet strength in the way she carried herself, despite the cruel labels the council had attached to her. Her gaze met his, sharp and calculating, like a predator sizing up her next move. Batman studied her in return. "You must be the great Batman," she said, her voice steady and unwavering, despite the clear discomfort in her tone. There was no mockery in her words, only quiet acknowledgement. "I am," he said simply, his tone low, unreadable. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "And you're the princess I inherited." She nodded, a slight frown forming on her face. "I'm sorry for what they've said about me, but I have little control over their opinions. I'm merely the heir to a dying legacy." Her words carried a weight Batman understood. He had seen what power could do to a person, how it could warp even the noblest of hearts. But there was something in her eyes, something more than the softness the council saw. There was intellect, a hidden fire burning behind those strange, glowing eyes. He didn't say anything immediately. Instead, he studied her. They were both trapped in a game neither of them had chosen, but there was something unspoken between them. A mutual understanding, perhaps, a recognition of the stakes they were both facing. "You know what they say about you," he murmured, the words slipping from his lips almost by accident. "They think you're weak. A joke." Her lips twisted into something close to a smile, though it was devoid of humor. "They do," she replied softly, "but they are wrong." Batman stepped closer, his face an emotionless mask. "Prove it," he said simply. She didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her back, her eyes now filled with determination. "I will, for both of us." There was no turning back now. The game had begun, and neither of them were in control of the rules. But Batman knew one thing for certain: the mocking would soon end, and whatever lay ahead, he and Princess Isha would face it together. The royal palace of Rorschach stood in stark contrast to the desolate landscape outside. Its towering spires reached toward the pale blue sky, a monument to the power that had once ruled the galaxy. Inside, the walls were lined with relics of a forgotten age. Trophies of war, ancient scrolls, and forgotten technologies. Batman walked through the silent halls, his eyes scanning every corner, his mind calculating the next move. Princess Isha had led him here, deeper into the heart of the palace, to a section of the royal vaults no one had entered for centuries. The air was thick with the scent of old dust and the weight of secrets long buried. Isha moved with purpose, her posture regal despite the ridicule she had suffered. Batman could sense the tension in her. Her every movement was deliberate, as though she were trying to prove something to herself, to him, and perhaps to the galaxy. "I should warn you," she said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. "What you're about to see will change everything." Batman didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew. They had both felt it, the unease that hung over them like a storm waiting to break. The weapon her father had hidden, the one that now belonged to him, was more than a relic. It was the key to everything. They reached a large ancient door made of a strange glowing metal. The air hummed as they approached, and Batman could feel the energy pulsating from behind it. Isha placed her hand on the door's surface, and it slid open with a soft, resonant click, revealing a chamber that seemed to stretch forever. In the center, surrounded by arcane symbols, was a pedestal. Atop it rested a strange device, glowing faintly with a blue light. It looked like nothing Batman had ever seen before, an amalgamation of advanced technology and ancient alien craftsmanship. "This," Isha said, her voice barely a whisper, "is the Elder Protocol." Batman stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the object. The room seemed to grow colder, as if the very air around them was holding its breath. He knew this was no ordinary weapon. He could feel its power, ancient and vast, pressing against his senses. "The king," Batman began, his words measured. He knew about this. Isha nodded, her eyes haunted. He discovered it too late. The weapon was never meant to be controlled by a single ruler. It was designed for something much greater. She paused, her hands tightening into fists. "But my father, he tried to unlock its true potential. He wanted to use it to dominate, to ensure our kingdom's survival. And that's why they killed him." That man's gaze never wavered from the device. He could feel the weight of history in the air, the lives lost, the wars fought, all leading to this moment. The weapon wasn't just a tool of war. It was something much more insidious. The more he examined it, the more he realized the scope of its potential. "You said it was designed for something greater," he said slowly, turning his attention back to Isha. "What was that purpose?" Isha's eyes met his, dark with a secret she had been carrying for far too long. "It's a consciousness, Batman. The Elder Protocol isn't just a weapon. It's an artificial intelligence. It can control entire fleets, reshape minds, and even influence the fabric of space itself. The king was close to unlocking its full power when he died. But the real danger, the real purpose, was to control entire civilizations." That man absorbed the information in silence, his mind racing. He had dealt with sentient machines before, but nothing like this. A weapon that could manipulate entire fleets, bending reality to its will. It was more than just dangerous. It was a threat to the entire galaxy. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. Isha's gaze softened, a mix of determination and fear in her eyes. "I'm the last of the royal bloodline. The weapon will only respond to me. But I don't know if I can control it. I don't know if anyone can." That man stepped closer, his eyes fixed on hers. "We'll figure it out. Together." For a moment, the weight of the situation hung heavy between them. But Isha's expression hardened. There was no more time for doubt. They were standing on the edge of something vast, something terrible, and they had no choice but to move forward. As Batman extended his hand, Isha took it. The bond between them, forged in the fires of their shared mission, was unspoken but strong. The future of the galaxy rested in their hands. And the countdown had already begun. The silence in the royal vault was broken only by the faint hum of the Elder Protocol as it continued to glow, its pulse steady but foreboding. Batman and Isha stood before it, the weight of their shared responsibility pressing down on them. For a moment, neither spoke. There was so much left unsaid, so many questions that still loomed between them, unanswered. Isha's eyes were fixed on the device, her fingers lightly grazing its surface. "I don't know if I can control it," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Her voice was tinged with doubt. something Betty Manan wasn't used to hearing from someone so regal, so composed. She had always seemed like a figure of power, but now, standing before this ancient weapon, she was just a woman, vulnerable, unsure, but determined. Batman watched her closely, noting the conflict in her stance, the way her shoulders were tense, as though the weight of her father's legacy had already broken her. The throne she was supposed to inherit was more than just a seat of power. It was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in this kingdom. She wasn't just a princess. She was the last chance for a galaxy that had already begun to unravel. "We'll figure it out," Batman said, his voice steady, without hesitation. His gaze was unwavering as he met hers. "I'm not here to take over. I'm here to help you." Isha looked at him, her eyes searching, as though trying to gauge if he was sincere or if this was just another ploy for control. But there was no mask in his expression, no hidden agenda. Batman was not a man who offered empty promises. He knew what he was capable of, and he trusted that together they could overcome anything. "Help me?" she asked, incredulous. "Help me how? You're a warrior, not a diplomat. You don't even belong here." He didn't flinch. "Maybe. But I know what it takes to win, and I'm not leaving until we do." Isha's eyes softened, just for a second, before the resolve returned. She turned away from him, pacing slowly in the dim light of the vault. "You don't understand. This isn't just a weapon. It's a consciousness, an ancient one. From a time before any of us. It was built to ensure the survival of a race that no longer exists. My father thought he could use it to save us. But instead, it's cursed us." Batman stepped forward, closing the gap between them. "Then we'll make sure it doesn't curse anyone else." Her expression hardened. "You don't get it, do you? The weapon can only be controlled by someone from my bloodline. If I fail, it will destroy everything." She paused, her voice cracking slightly. "And I don't even know if I can succeed." Batman didn't say anything at first. He could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that had haunted him for as long as he could remember. He had felt it, too. The fear that no matter how hard he tried, the weight of responsibility would break him. But he also knew that fear was something you could conquer. Not by running from it, but by facing it head-on. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly, his tone softer than before. "You've already proven more than anyone else ever could. I'll help you. We'll figure it out together." Isha met his gaze again, searching for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was determination, a strength that matched her own. For the first time since her father's death, she allowed herself to feel something other than the crushing weight of expectation. "All right," she said finally, nodding slowly. "We do this together. No more running from it." Batman nodded, his jaw tightening with resolve. They both knew what lay ahead. There was no more time to waste. The Elder Protocol, the weapon capable of reshaping entire fleets, could be both their salvation or their undoing. It wasn't just about defeating enemies now. It was about controlling something ancient, something that could decide the fate of the galaxy. And if they didn't succeed, it would all fall apart. The bond between them had been forged in the fire of their shared mission, and with it came a trust that could not be broken. No more mockery, no more games. What they faced now was real, and it was something neither of them could face alone. Together, they would unlock the weapon's power. Together, they would change the fate of the galaxy. And no one, not the Council, not the weapon, not even their own fears, could stand in their way. The palace was silent in the early hours of the morning, the only sound the soft whisper of wind against the ancient stone walls. Batman and Isha stood in the chamber, facing the Elder Protocol, which hummed with an otherworldly energy. The glowing blue light from the device bathed the room in an eerie glow, casting shadows across their faces. Isha's hands trembled slightly as she approached the pedestal. Batman could see the conflict within her. Her eyes were filled with determination, but there was a flicker of fear too. The weight of her family's legacy was heavy on her, and the pressure of controlling the weapon that could reshape entire civilizations was almost too much to bear. Batman watched her carefully, his mind calculating the steps ahead. They had spent the last few hours studying the device, trying to understand its inner workings, but the truth was simple. They were venturing into the unknown. The Elder Protocol wasn't just a weapon. It was a force, a sentient consciousness built to bend the universe to its will. It was as ancient as it was powerful, and neither of them knew how it would react when they tried to activate it. "I'm ready," Isha said quietly, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. Batman nodded, but his expression remained unreadable. "Are you sure?" She looked at him, the weight of the moment in her gaze. "I have no choice. The galaxy needs this. I need this." He didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. He trusted her, and that trust was all that mattered now. She was the only one who could control the weapon. And for better or worse, the future of the galaxy was in her hands. Isha stepped forward, her hand hovering just above the device. For a moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a deep, steadying breath, she placed her palm on the smooth surface. The reaction was immediate. The entire room trembled as the blue light flared brighter, the symbols etched into the walls glowing with a pulse that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. The humming from the Elder Protocol grew louder, louder still, until it was almost deafening. Batman instinctively took a step back, his hand resting on the hilt of his utility belt, ready for whatever might come next. The device responded. Slowly, almost languidly, the energy began to shift, the symbols on the walls flickering and rearranging, as if the room itself were coming alive. Batman could feel the power emanating from the device, a force so immense it almost felt tangible, pressing against his chest. Isha's breathing was ragged, but she didn't flinch. She gritted her teeth, her eyes focused on the glowing symbols, her palms still pressed firmly against the Elder Protocol. The device was testing her. Batman could sense that much. It was pushing her, prodding her, trying to see if she was truly worthy of controlling it. "Stay focused," Batman murmured, his voice calm, though his senses were on high alert. He was watching for any sign that something was wrong, but so far, Isha held her ground. Her eyes flickered, the tension in her face giving way to a subtle shift. Something was changing. The glowing light from the device surged, and for a brief moment, Batman saw something in her eyes that startled him. Confidence. It was fleeting, but it was there. She was beginning to understand it, to control it. Then, without warning, the device flared with a burst of power so intense that it sent a shockwave through the chamber. The walls cracked, and the floor trembled beneath them. Isha staggered, but she didn't fall. Her hand remained pressed against the device, her body straining against the force. "I can't hold it," she shouted, her voice strained with the effort. Batman reacted immediately, stepping forward and grabbing her wrist. "You can. You have to." The struggle in her eyes was clear. The device was pushing her, testing her limits. It was trying to break her. But Isha refused to yield. She gritted her teeth, her body trembling with the effort. But her resolve hardened. With a final, desperate cry, she pushed back against the energy, forcing the device to respond to her will. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the energy surged into a controlled pulse. The light dimmed, the humming slowed, and the power stabilized. Batman released his grip on her wrist, his eyes never leaving her face. She stood there, breathing heavily, sweat beading on her brow, but her gaze was unwavering. She had done it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the moment hung in the air, and Batman could feel the shift. Something had changed. Isha had proven herself, not just to the device, but to herself. She had taken control, and together, they had unlocked the power that could change the course of the galaxy. The quiet after the storm was almost more unnerving than the chaos that had preceded it. The glowing light from the Elder Protocol dimmed to a soft, steady pulse, as if it too had finally found a rhythm. Batman stood by Aisha's side, watching her closely. Sweat glistened on her forehead, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. The tension had left her shoulders, but the exhaustion remained. She had passed the test, but what had truly changed? The room, once alive with power, now felt oddly still. The hum of the device faded into the background, and the distant sounds of the palace beyond the vault seemed muffled, as if the world outside had been suspended in time. Isha finally broke the silence, her voice steady but tired. "It's done. I've done it." Batman didn't answer immediately. His eyes were sharp, scanning every corner of the chamber. His instincts, honed from years of experience, told him that this victory, however hard-won, wasn't the end. There was more lurking in the shadows, things they hadn't accounted for, things that were already moving, even now. "We're not done," Batman said quietly, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Not yet." Isha turned to him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "We have control. The weapon is ours." He met her gaze, his eyes hard with a determination that matched her own. "Control doesn't mean safety. We've only just begun. There's a reason your father didn't succeed. There's a reason the galaxy hasn't fallen under the sway of the Elder Protocol." Isha opened her mouth to argue, but Batman held up a hand, his gaze never leaving the flickering symbols around them. The device was still active, its pulse steady, but Batman could feel something else in the air, an undercurrent of tension, a presence. Suddenly, the walls of the vault trembled, not from the energy of the Elder Protocol, but from something else. A deep rumble, like the sound of something large and powerful shifting. Far below the ground, the floor beneath their feet began to vibrate. "What the hell?" Isha whispered, stepping back. Her eyes widened as the vibrations grew stronger, more violent. Batman was already moving, his mind racing. "They know we've activated it," he said, his voice calm but urgent. He reached for his communicator, sending a quick, encrypted message to the ship waiting outside the palace. "Prepare for extraction. We need to move." But as soon as he hit send, the room went dark. The blue light from the Elder Protocol flickered, and the hum of the device stilled. For a brief moment, Batman thought it had failed, but then the walls began to glow. Not with the soft blue light of the device, but with a harsh red hue. It was as if the entire vault had become a trap, a cage. Isha gasped. "What's happening?" "I knew it," Batman muttered. "We've been compromised." The red glow pulsed faster now, as if responding to their fear. The chamber itself seemed to come alive, shifting, rearranging. The symbols on the walls began to twist, forming new shapes, shapes that were darker, more foreboding. It was as though the device had been waiting for them to unlock it, only to betray them the moment it was activated. Isha took a step back, her expression one of growing horror. "What is this? What's controlling it?" "The Elder Protocol is not just a weapon," Batman said, his voice tight. "It's a part of something much older, something that was never meant to be disturbed." The rumbling below them grew louder, and suddenly the floor cracked open. From beneath the stone, massive, mechanical arms emerged, each one adorned with strange markings, their movements fluid and precise, as though they had been lying in wait for centuries. They reached for the Elder Protocol, as if the device were calling them. "This was the King's mistake," Batman growled, already springing into action. "He didn't just awaken the weapon. He unleashed something far worse. They've been lying dormant for millennia. And now, they're waking up." Isha's eyes widened as she watched the mechanical monstrosities rise, their massive forms blocking the exit. "What are they?" "Guardians," Batman said, his voice low and grim. "They were built to protect the Elder Protocol from anyone who would try to control it. And now, they're here to stop us." Without another word, Batman moved into position, his body shifting into combat mode. His mind raced through tactical possibilities, weighing options as he prepared for the fight ahead. The presence of the Guardians wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration that their control over the device had come at a price. And that price was a battle for their lives. The stakes had just been raised, and there was no turning back. The Guardians loomed in the shadows, their massive mechanical limbs creaking as they slowly rose from the ground. The room, once a sanctuary of ancient power, had transformed into a battleground. The Guardians, towering and unyielding, had only one purpose: to protect the Elder Protocol at any cost. Batman didn't waste time. His mind clicked into high gear, calculating every possible move. His eyes locked onto the nearest Guardian, its gleaming red eyes glowing with an almost sentient malice. Its massive arms swung forward with terrifying speed, and in that split second, Batman dove to the side, rolling across the ground just as the mechanical fist crashed into the stone floor where he had been standing moments before. Dust exploded from the impact. "Move," Batman shouted, turning his head to Aisha. She was frozen for a moment, eyes wide with fear, but then the sharpness in his voice snapped her out of it. "Right," she yelled back, taking cover behind the pedestal that once held the Elder Protocol. Her hand hovered near the device, the energy from it still thrumming in the air, but she knew the weapon couldn't help them now. The Guardians were beyond it. Batman was already on his feet, calculating his next strike. The Guardian who had attacked him turned its head, its gaze fixed on him like a predator zeroing in on its prey. But Batman wasn't about to be easy prey. He moved fast, his body fluid, a blur of motion as he leaped forward, launching a series of high-speed attacks. His fists slammed into the Guardian's metal exterior, the force of each punch causing sparks to fly. But it wasn't enough. The Guardian's armor absorbed the blows with ease, its unyielding frame barely flinching. Isha's voice rang out again, sharp and urgent. "Batman, it's not just brute strength. There's a weak point in their cores. I can see it from here." He didn't hesitate. Batman turned his focus to the center of the Guardian's chest, where a small glowing core pulsed with a faint blue light. It was the source of its power, and it was the key to bringing it down. But getting to it wouldn't be easy. The Guardian's thick metal arms swung at him again, a deadly arc that would crush him if it connected. Batman sprang into the air, flipping over the incoming strike. His boots hit the stone floor with a thud, and before the Guardian could react, he was already moving toward its vulnerable core. With a quick flick of his wrist, a small razor-sharp blade extended from his gauntlet. He drove it straight into the crack between the Guardian's armored plating, aiming for the core. The metal screeched as his blade scraped against it, but he didn't stop. His hand tightened around the blade, and with one final powerful thrust, he pierced the Guardian's chest. The creature let out a mechanical roar, its body jerking violently as sparks erupted from the wound. The core flickered, then shattered with a sudden burst of energy. The Guardian's body crumpled to the ground with a resounding crash. Isha had already moved to the next Guardian, firing a series of shots from a concealed blaster she had grabbed earlier. The blasts hit their mark, but like the first, the damage was superficial. The Guardian didn't seem to care. It advanced, its massive footfalls shaking the ground beneath them. Batman didn't wait. He sprinted across the battlefield, drawing the attention of the remaining Guardians. With their focus on him, Isha took her chance. She darted forward, slipping past the heavy footsteps of the looming machines and leaping onto the pedestal where the Elder Protocol had once been. Her fingers danced over the ancient markings, activating a series of hidden mechanisms embedded in the walls. The room trembled again, but this time it wasn't the Guardians. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a series of energy weapons, long-range cannons and blasters, all powered by the very device they had activated. Aisha's eyes narrowed in determination. "Batman," she shouted, her voice steady now, more confident than it had been. "I've got something that can help." Without hesitation, Batman turned and ran toward her, his mind racing with the possibilities. The Guardians were still closing in, But if Isha could get those weapons online, they might stand a chance. "I'm going to need a distraction," he said quickly, his voice sharp as he grabbed a weapon from the panel. "No problem," Isha said, her voice tinged with a growing sense of purpose. She activated the first cannon, sending a surge of energy directly at the approaching Guardian. The blast was powerful, knocking the Guardian back several paces, but it wasn't enough to destroy it. Batman, however, was already in motion. With one final burst of speed, he launched himself at the second Guardian, landing on its back and immediately targeting its vulnerable core. The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the chamber. 2 Guardians down, but there were more to come. The air crackled with energy as Batman and Isha stood side by side, surrounded by the hulking remnants of the mechanical Guardians they had just defeated. The once proud vault now resembled a war zone. Stone pillars crumbled, walls were scorched, and the air was thick with the smell of burning metal. But the fight was far from over. Batman scanned the room, his sharp eyes locking on the remaining Guardians that were advancing toward them. They were battered but still functional, their glowing red eyes locked onto their targets with chilling precision. The sound of their mechanical limbs moving in sync sent a wave of dread through the room, but Batman's focus remained razor-sharp. He wasn't afraid. He never had been. Isha's breath was steady, but there was a determined fire in her eyes. Her earlier fear had been replaced with resolve. She had seen what she was capable of, and now she knew she could win. The weapons they had activated in the vault were still functional, and she was ready to use them. "We've got one shot at this," Batman said, his voice low and commanding. "If we don't take them down now, we're done." "I know," Isha replied, her hand hovering over a set of controls on the wall. She was ready. She could feel the power of the weapon at her fingertips. "I've unlocked the main cannon. We fire it together." Batman nodded, his eyes scanning the approaching Guardians once more. They were relentless, their massive bodies closing in with each passing second. They would reach them in mere moments. "On my mark," Batman said, his voice steady despite the growing tension. His eyes never left the Guardians. He could feel the sweat on his brow, the rising pulse of adrenaline. This was it, the final stand. "Mark," Isha said, her hand gripping the control panel, ready to activate the cannon at a moment's notice. With a quick motion, Batman threw a smoke grenade to the ground. A thick, choking cloud erupted in an instant, obscuring the view of the Guardians. Batman moved through the haze like a shadow, his body nimble and precise as he navigated the darkened space. He needed to create a gap, just enough time for Isha to lock onto their targets. The Guardians were confused at first, their mechanical minds unable to process the sudden shift in their environment. Batman took full advantage of their disorientation, moving from one to the next with lightning-fast strikes. He disabled the first Guardian's left arm, then the second's right leg. Each attack was swift, calculated, aimed to slow them down. "Now, Isha," Batman shouted, his voice cutting through the smoke. Isha's fingers danced across the control panel, and in a flash, the massive energy cannon activated. A blinding beam of concentrated energy shot across the room, slamming into the closest Guardian with enough force to send it crashing into the wall. The explosion rocked the chamber, sending debris flying in all directions. But the remaining Guardians were still standing. Their bodies were battered, but they had not been completely destroyed. The fight was far from over. Batman felt the surge of energy from the cannon reverberate through the room. Isha had bought them precious time, but it was not enough. They needed more power, more precision. "I can't hold this," Isha shouted, sweat pouring down her face as she struggled to control the power surging from the cannon. "It's too much." "You don't have to hold it," Batman said quickly. "Just aim for their cores. I'll finish them off." With a final, desperate push, Isha redirected the cannon's power, aiming directly for the glowing blue cores of the Guardians. The beam shot forward again, this time striking the chest of the closest Guardian. The core cracked, sending out a pulse of destructive energy. The Guardian let out a mechanical roar before crumbling to the ground in a heap of smoldering metal. Batman was already in motion. He sprinted forward, his body moving like a blur, and with one powerful leap, he reached the last Guardian. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep this up, but there was no other choice. With a swift motion, Batman jammed his blade into the Guardian's exposed core, twisting it until the light in the creature's chest flickered and died. The Guardian crumpled, its massive frame collapsing like a tower of stone. The vault was finally silent. Batman stood in the center of the room, panting, his body covered in sweat and blood from the battle. Isha collapsed to her knees beside the control panel, her chest heaving with exhaustion. For a moment, neither spoke. The adrenaline was still coursing through them, but the weight of what they had just done began to sink in. It was over. The Guardians were gone. The weapon was theirs. Isha looked up at Batman, her eyes filled with both relief and gratitude. "We did it," she whispered. Batman nodded, his gaze distant. "No," he said softly, "we survived. And that's just the beginning."